Well, the Department of Justice is clashing with attorneys of former President Donald Trump again. Each side has proposed the names of two legal experts to review materials the FBI seized at Mar-a-Lago last month. Neither side agrees on the list of who should become the so-called special master. U.S. District Court Judge Eileen Cannon plans to appoint a third party to sift through the materials and decide what information investigators can keep. Niall Stanage joins us now to talk about this, White House columnist for NewsNation partner The Hill. Niall, it's so great to see you as always.
Great to see you, Natasha.
So can this election process eventually be fair to both sides?
It's difficult because it's difficult to see where the common ground lies between both sides, to be perfectly honest. The disagreements right now are not just about who should be the special master, they're also about the scope of the special master's duties and the duration that he or she should be permitted to take. And of course, against this whole backdrop, we also have the fact that the government is appealing the judge's decision in the first place to appoint a special master. In addition, the government is arguing, for example, that if that person is appointed, they shouldn't be able to determine claims of executive privilege, and that documents with classified markings should be automatically excluded from this filtering process because they're the government's property anyway, in the DOJ's opinion.
Can you explain the significance of all of this? Why does it matter so much? And how is the appointment of a special master going to affect or change the way that the seized documents are perceived or this investigation overall?
So one of the key ways in which it's going to change things is simply slowing down the investigation. The Department of Justice hoped that it would have untrammeled access to these documents, that it could then build a case if it indeed believes that crimes have been committed. That process is going to be slowed significantly if a special master is appointed, particularly if the judge accepts the Trump side's argument that the special master could have up to 3 months to finish his or her work. The other way, briefly, that it affects things is just on questions like executive privilege. The government has been very scathing of the Trump arguments on that score, but that doesn't really change the Trump position that he can still exert executive privilege over some of these documents. That is going to be a very serious point of contention.
Why would the Trump team want to slow down this investigation? How does that help him?
I think there are a couple of things. Firstly, the longer the investigation is out there, the more he can attack it, the more he can complain that he has been unfairly dealt with. But there's another more specific, though related reason. There's a lot of speculation building that former President Trump is going to enter the 2024 presidential race. In fact, I think it was just last week that you and I were on air during his rally, Natasha, where we were talking about how close he seemed to be coming to declaring his candidacy. If he becomes a candidate, it doesn't affect the legal apparatus, but in realistic terms, it makes it probably more difficult for the government to present this probe as simply pursuing the law where it takes them. The former president would clearly portray it as an attack on his future presidential ambitions.
Interesting. It sort of politicizes this investigation. When will both sides respond to the other's proposed candidates? How does that play out? What do you expect in terms of a timeline for all this at this point?
Well, one key timeline is this Thursday, and that's the time that the government wants the judge to stay her ruling appointing the special master in the first place. The government has said that if she does not pause that decision, that they will appeal to a higher court. I know for many people who aren't following every twist and turn of this, it can be a little confusing. But basically, if they appeal, if the DOJ appeals the appointment of a special master, period, then we're in something of a period of limbo until that very central question is determined. That would go to a higher court, to an appeals court to be determined.
All right, Niall Stanage, appreciate the bigger picture look at that. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.